Welcome everyone, Kostin here with a discussion about Kislev in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires and how Creative Assembly missed the mark with them when they were designing them in Warhammer 3 and how they haven't really fixed them despite the fact that we did get a major update which has a change. But here's the thing. What has a change added was more units, a new hero, a new lore choice with 4.2, but none of that actually fixes the underlying issues. Kislev's problems have never been that its roster has ever really been lacking. Sure, it may be an expensive roster that you can't afford, but it is certainly a very functional roster that does get the job done in a campaign. And once you learn how to use it, once you learn how to take advantage of various tricks, if you will, in a campaign, it ends up being far less of an annoyance. For instance, I can get a confederation over here with the Druzina Enclave very quickly on turn 2 if I play my cards right in a campaign as Catherine. Now keep in mind this is with a not resolved mod, so I don't have to fight these battles manually. Always fight the battles manually if you're playing vanilla, especially the early ones in particular, because yeah, you'll take significantly fewer casualties. But all the same, let's consider Kislev. The shield, the bulwark of the north. Well, they certainly are the bulwark of the north in Immortal Empires because they've got Azazel, they've got Frot, and they have also Trog over here to deal with. And those are just the threats of the north. Then you've got Festus, and yes, he is an issue because he's close enough to your territory as either Castalton or Katrin that he's going to be a problem. Draika, who's very, very scary. Azag. And then, of course, Archeon over here if you're playing as Boris Ursus. By the way, Boris Ursus has the easiest time out of all of them because he only really has to deal with Archeon in his campaign, and that's assuming you stay in the north. But all the same, this campaign can be really rough, especially if you're a new player starting out with the game trying to figure out. But then you realize a couple of things. Well, I can use the load save character system to get eye switches that have good traits like a 10% upkeep and 15% recruitment cost reduction for units as an example over there. That's one of the things I can use. Oh, the special cities of Kislev can get a good amount of growth, so I can actually get them to a higher tier relatively quickly. I can get a Frost Maiden hero instantly, or two of them instantly on turn 1 using the same save load character system. I can avoid fighting Draika and Azag by just not getting involved in the Ostermark and just not looking at them funny and not taking too much damage with my armies. Those are the kind of things you can use in a Kislev campaign. And then you consider other things as well in a Kislev campaign. That you do have plentiful heroes because you can increase hero capacity for Patriarchs at tier 2 with every settlement that you get can get a bunch of Hag Witches, which has a change at tier 3. But honestly, Hag Witches are not really that significant because when I'm playing a campaign as a Sankhya, sure, I'll use them. But when I'm playing a campaign as anyone else, I won't really bother too much with them. I got magic. That's not the issue in a Kislev campaign. Though it is a shame that Katrin's magic is kind of useless because she basically only has one special skill line that helps with her. I mean, she gets that cooldown ability, but Frost magic is just not as good as Tempest magic, and yeah, Tempest magic just like obliterates everything. So why would you bother with Katrin's magic skill when you can get a Frost Maiden and Tempest magic to cast much better spells, including things like the Hawks of Miska, which is an incredibly powerful spell. Expensive to be certain, but yeah, it's just kind of one of those weird situations. Army-wise, like another thing to mention, army-wise, you have really solid ranged units. And while they don't have the best damage stats, in fact, I would say Goblin Archers are generally better to get than these guys, the one thing that they do have is incredible morale. Not because the leadership is so very high, but rather because By Our Blood makes it so that Kislev armies break very hard to break in any particular battle. So those are real advantages that you do have in a Kislev campaign. Significant advantages. You do have a lack of siege, but Kossar army will destroy many of the foes you are dealing with early on because you're dealing with Warriors of Chaos, you're dealing with Skaven. Skaven are going to get a bunch of clan rats. They're going to throw a bunch of clan rats and Skaven slaves. The only issue is if you fight 3 armies at once, or 2 armies at once, but that's just more about maneuvering on the campaign map in a good way and taking advantage of the situation. Zazel and Archeon have powerful armies, sure, but they just have one powerful army. That's not really a big problem if you're an experienced player who knows what they're doing. Obviously, if you're a new player, someone that's trying to get used to the game and all that, this is a harsh situation. It's kind of sad, really, because Kislev, I'm fairly certain that Creative Assembly was looking to design Kislev as kind of like the tutorial race, like the race that everyone would play, everyone would get used to learn the mechanics. It's one of the worst races to play if you're a new player. It's the kind of race that is very rewarding from a battle perspective as a veteran player, because you do have a lot of power with your armies between the magic, the replenishment that Patriarchs do provide, the sheer armor of Armored Cossars and their ability to hold the line very, very well. That's great. That's all well and good. When we were talking about a Kislev campaign, that's all very well and good in a Kislev campaign. But yeah, a new player dealing with Kislev, and this has been the case since day one. It's not like what I'm talking about here is anything new, really. It's not. It's like it's all been known since the day the game came out. Really, I'm not exaggerating or joking in any way, shape, or form in this particular video. This is exactly like the same dynamic has existed for Kislev early on. Lots of enemies to deal with, so it can be a harsh road to tackle early on in a campaign, to be certain, but good amount of power otherwise. And yes, you can always get that confederation going in the exact same way that I pulled it off over there, and then get rid of the barracks that you did just pick up. Or maybe the barracks says... Regardless, Kislev does have a good amount of potential in their campaign, but this is the but. Here's the problem for Kislev. While you can deal with your initial foes in a campaign rather effectively, I would add, well, that's certainly something you can tackle, and that's not really too big of a problem. The issue that you're going to encounter in a Kislev campaign that Creative Assembly did nothing to fix with Shadows of Change is how unrewarding this campaign feels. Like, you're dealing with a lot of major foes. You should feel like this is a great campaign, right? It's like, oh, I get to deal with really powerful foes, so I should be playing a really powerful faction, right? Unfortunately, that's not really how things work over here in a Kislev campaign, and in fact, it's quite the opposite situation. So they added the new legendary hero with 4.2, they added more units, they already added units with SOC, but they did absolutely nothing to fix the underlying issues of the race. And in fact, Astankia's campaign is kind of like the worst campaign of them all, when you consider it, because she doesn't have access to Armor Cossar, she doesn't have access to Patriarchs right from the beginning. She can recruit Akshina, sure, she can recruit those Forest Spirit units, but it's a limited campaign that you have to spend like 20 turns just, or 10, 15 turns or whatever to get back to Kislev, then get a military alliance with someone in Kislev. And mind you, confederating any of the Kislev factions to get access to special cities that confer a great deal of advantages, especially Prague and Erengrad, is difficult. But beyond that point, you know, beyond that particular point, like, you look at the Stankia, she's just tedious. Like, oh, she has a lot of battle power. Sure, I get that. Like, the Stankia is ridiculous. Like, she can recruit actually very quickly with her incredibly powerful units. She can do so. She can really steamroll Morathi if you play your cards right. Absolutely so. That's not really the problem. The problem... The problem in that situation, however, is something else entirely. The problem with Astankia is, like, it's just so tedious having to deal with all of the curses, all of those issues, like just constantly having to spend every single turn. Like, you start the turn and you have to remember every single time to make sure that you're always that you're always getting all the curses, because you need to max out those curses to unlock the teleportation, for instance, to Kislev, and to actually achieve your campaign objectives in order to get the great benefit that Kislev does have from a short campaign victory, which is hero capacity. Because while Patriarchs are plentiful, Frost Maidens are not, and you kind of do want a lot of Frost Maidens in your campaign if you are playing as Kislev. That's one issue with the Stankia, and also her lack of replenishment forces you to fight a lot more manual battles than you otherwise would, and they're very boring. A lot of those battles are really, really, really boring to actually deal with. But beyond that, you also have to talk about the supporter system. So one of the issues that you do have if you are playing Katrin or Castaltin, and to a far lesser extent Borosursus, though he still wants to build supporters, is how much of a rope around your neck that supporter system is going to be in your campaigns. Like that, Katrin and Castaltin's short campaign victory condition, and I find it ridiculous that this has remained the case ever since Immortal Empires has come out. Like, for all the patches, for all the changes, for all the things that Creative Assembly has done with the game since it has come out, that this is the one thing they have refused to change. It's actually quite a sad state of affairs. And yes, I'm going to lose those wing lancers. They're not the problem, really. What they have refused to change so far is like the victory conditions. Requiring 600 supporters for your short campaign victory conditions is ridiculous for Katrin and Castaltin. It genuinely hurts their campaigns because it means they're going to be far behind Borosursus and Nastankia, because they'll just end up having less heroes when that actually has impact in their respective campaigns, specifically earlier on. And that's one of the problems. 600 supporters takes a very, very long time to actually achieve in a campaign, because you're gaining, like, for instance, you might gain, 6 per turn early on. Sure, once you build more churches and all that kind of good stuff, you will eventually start making more of them, no problem. But early on in a campaign, you're not gonna have so many. So it takes longer in a campaign as either Katrin or Castaltin to get the short campaign victory condition than the vast majority of other campaigns. It's only like campaigns like Tyrion, who requires to deal with Malekith, that it's even comparable. And even then, if you really wanted to, as Tyrion, if you really, really wanted to do it as Tyrion or Malekith, the other side of the coin there, if you wanted to do it, you could certainly achieve, you could certainly rush for that objective. And mind you, the Dark Elf reward is nowhere near as significant. The High Elf reward absolutely is, because it is hero capacity as well. But while Tyrion has a significant drawback in that respect, it is at least something you can do, like, within 30 turns, if you really push for it, right? Like, you may not want to, because you have other things to deal with. You may have other concerns in your campaign, as opposed to just rushing Malekith with 1-2 armies. But all the same, at least you can do it. Whereas with Kislev, with Katrin and Castaltin, because how limited supporters can be in a campaign, because the best way to gain supporters is to invoke Urson, keep that invocation up, and take as many territories as possible. But yeah, because of the limits that Katrin and Castaltin end up having in their respective campaigns, they actually end up achieving that far slower. In fact, it gets to the ridiculous and absurd point that when you're playing a campaign as either of them, you may genuinely achieve the long campaign victory conditions, which is to wipe out Archeon, Daniel, Azazel, and Festus, much earlier than you will your short campaign victory conditions. That's just, like, genuinely one of the most absurd ones that you can think of, really, in a specific campaign. that's just silly. I'm sorry. That is just a really silly one. But okay, beyond the victory condition situation, because that's just part of the problem and it's not the only one. Beyond the victory condition problem that you do have in these kind of campaigns, there are other issues as well when you are playing any Kislev campaign, and this applies to Nastankia as well. The issue of the economy. See, Kislev may have a lot of foes to deal with, and they're powerful foes. Even as a Stangen, Morathi is a really powerful legendary lord in the game, and she's gonna teleport anyway to Draika, so it's like, you get to deal with Morathi, and then you get to deal with Draika. Those are not easy fights. Sure, the power is there, undeniably, so if you're playing Berserkers, you get to deal with Archon relatively quickly in a campaign, or you could choose not to if you really want to. But honestly, like, given the way the game is currently right now, I'd say it's probably better for Berserkers to stay where he starts in at the moment. That was different when... That has changed, at least. Because it was much better earlier on to actually abandon... your initial province. If you were playing as Berserkers. That has certainly changed. Undeniably so. And that perhaps is for the better in that particular campaign. Yes, I know I am going to go bankrupt. But even despite all the changes that CA has made to the game since then, the issue of the Kislev's poor economy still remains, and it's still a rope around your neck. Why do I say that? Why do I make that specific point? Well, the reason I make that specific point comes down to this. When you're looking at Kislev's economy, the special cities of Kislev, they have one principal economic building. This goes all the way at tier 5 to 1200 income. This, you could say, oh, it's similar to a Dark Fortress. It's not. A Dark Fortress will generate significantly more money than this, because you will have, because with the Dark Fortress you have that 50% economic modifier that you can get through one of their main buildings, and that's just one economic modifiers. You do have, obviously, some economic modifiers, and you do have some other economic buildings. You can get like the Haunted Forest to generate some more money. You can generate trade resources for the animal den. There are ways to get more money, but ultimately, you're not gonna, like it, the special cities of Kislev, which are supposed to be very rich in the lore, are not very rich in the lore. Are not very rich in the game. And then you have the main building chain for the economy. Costs 1,000 for 100. It takes 10 turns for this to pay itself. 10 freaking turns just to get the money you spent back when you're playing a campaign as Kislev. And only goes up to 200 income for 2,000. You can, in a minor settlement. In a major settlement, you can get caravans, and you can get that trade resource production plus 50%. And keep in mind, they did at least change this, right? Like, I'll give them credit for changing the provinces a bit. Adding new settlements, adding provincial capitals to these settlements. Sure. Gotta give Creative Assembly some credit, but the economy itself is just so limited. Because of the way those economic buildings work. And yes, you do have the farms, but they're even less income. They're cheaper, to be sure, but they're going to generate less income. You do have good growth as Kislev, but you're in such a shortage of money, because you are dealing with these major foes, and those do require money to actually tackle in a campaign. And that's not a joke, really, in any way, shape, or form. That is not a joke. Those are major threats. Like, Frat is a major threat, regardless of how you might cut it. Azazel still is a major threat, so you're going to need multiple armies in order to tackle that, because if you play passively, you're just going to be overwhelmed. If you play aggressively, you will end up being bankrupt, pretty much. And that's where you start talking about more and more issues. Like, it has this knockoff effect in a campaign where you really do start feeling the economic hurt, if you will. Where you really do start feeling the economic hurt for playing as Kislev. And not gonna lie, it is pretty damn annoying. Could I win that battle? Yes, I could. Because it is just Skaven slaves ultimately.
Maiden of the Frosts.
You end up going bankrupt pretty quickly.
It suits my purpose.
You end up suffering significantly from an economic perspective in a campaign. And more importantly, from my perspective, is the fact that
They are one people.
it's not just that, it's also the fact that you end up feeling like building an empire, which you do need, because you're gonna go bankrupt. Like, you can't play this campaign passively. Because even if you defeat Azazel and Frat and say, oh, okay, I'm just gonna limit myself to Kislev, guess what? You're then gonna have Norska barreling down on you with their entire might coming down on you. You're then potentially going to have Archeon showing up. You need to be aggressive in this campaign. The cast wastes, yes, there is a commandment they added that removes the climate penalties. To be sure, that does exist right now. But I'm not gonna lie, it's still pretty damn painful going to the cast waste. Partly the distances are so huge, and you can only use the commandment, of course, once you've established full control over there. So it still ends up being painful to move in the castaways. And that's not even talking about the attrition. Also, you have Astrogoth, who is a problem in his own right as well.
It is Winter's request. Ice Court shall provide.
So it's not like you have, oh, I have a free ride in this campaign. You don't have a free ride. You have a difficult ride in this particular campaign if you're playing as any of the Kislev legendary lords. And yes, I know that army is gonna run away. I kind of expected that.
Follow the path.
Ooh.
The motherland fights as one.
So scary.
They are no threat.
Call me surprised. Pretty much expected that, I admit. And you end up in this kind of situation where you have difficult battles to tackle in a campaign. That was, by the way, a bit unfortunate with Rat. Like, it was kind of obvious he was going to have that, but I just kind of had no choice. It was either that or go bankrupt. Well, I suppose there is a choice. You're going to declare war on so many factions to keep your economy afloat that if you're playing as Kislev, it's not even funny. It's not even amusing. Like, you literally, if the Caffeine caravans don't show up at one point, you're going bankrupt. That is no joke. Like, it's that kind of situation. You're hanging on a precarious edge, but you're hanging there because of money. Now, that can be interesting to a certain extent, I'm not gonna lie, because it does obviously, you know, you're kind of at the edge of your seat, like, oh, am I gonna be able to get through this turn? Am I gonna get through that turn? Can I take the risk over here? That's fine. Problem is, like, long term, right? So short term can be fun, right? Can be fun once you get the hang of it, once you understand how to take advantage of the systems. But any kind of long-term campaign, like this campaign, it will be effectively over by this particular campaign will effectively be over in just a handful of turns. Because like once I deal with Rat and Azazel, like it becomes far less interesting because you can handle things early on, but then once you really get going, that's when it becomes, let's just say, it becomes somewhat painful to deal with the situation, as it were, in a campaign as Kislev. Because you're expanding your territory, you're dealing with more and more threats, you're dealing with more and more issues, and each army is such a colossal expense. And you can't just go like cheap armies either. You gotta have proper, good quality armies in order to make it work in a campaign as Kislev. But you never feel rewarded in the long term for building a massive empire or developing your cities because you're always like short on cash. Like you play a lot of other campaigns. Like sure, you can eventually get your income in a positive situation, but you're always going to be in this kind of situation where when you're playing a campaign as Kislev,
Ice gold.
They will fall.
a lot of the money that you have, you're never gonna build a big cache of money
Ice magic. The ice spreads.
in a campaign of these guys. Because you're gonna have to reinvest that money.
Defending this world requires resources.
Like over here, yeah, I built a cache of money. I'm also losing money every single freaking turn. That's just how it goes. And you always end up being at the edge of bankruptcy. Because to eventually end up in a positive economic state, to actually have
Storm summoner.
success, if you will,
March. There is no alternative.
you do need to invest a lot in the promises you do take
Kneel before me.
in order to make to really make it work. Another thing I find really silly, and this is more so something that I define silly, but because what this really adds up to, one of the best things you can do in a Kislev campaign is like, don't bother with Kislev, because Kislev is like indefensible. It's always exposed to chaos. You're constantly gonna have to spend more resources than you're gonna get in order to hold on to it. All that. No, what you want to do. Oof, the dwarves are gone. Damn, I did not expect that. I admit. That was a bit surprising, because I would have sold help it if I thought that was gonna happen. Just a lesson. But what you end up doing in this campaign, you realize, well, the best thing I can do is conquer the Empire. Like, sure, you deal with Vlad, Dryka, potentially Azag, Festus, too. But the bulwark of the north ends up the conqueror. Sorry, it is such a freaking silly situation. You end up being the conqueror of the freaking empire.
It is my duty.
And yes, that is an incredibly freaking silly thing.
Frost winds carry me.
As far as I see it, like, just so
I
ridiculous.
care only for what you can offer me. For them.
To have in a particular campaign.
Bride.
And it won't stop. It won't stop. That's the campaign dynamic you're gonna have to deal with. Sounds fun. It's not. It really is not a fun campaign dynamic to have to deal with. And then there's the invocations themselves. Oh yes, invoke Urson for the mighty supporters. Enjoy dealing with that one. Enjoy dealing with that specific campaign dynamic, because invocations, the cost of invocations do increase the more territory you hold. So you're incentivized to hold territory, because that's just how the game is right now. Like, playing a passive campaign only really works for the Wood Elves. I mean, a couple of others, sure. A couple of others, but for the vast majority of campaigns, you just basically want to be really aggressive, take a lot of territory, achieve a lot as quickly as possible. That's just how the game is, like, undeniably so. But the more territory you have, the more devotion you have to spend in order to keep that invocation, to get those supporters going. So all of this sounds awful and something that does reduce the campaign enjoyment, it's because it is all
Others
pretty
may
damn
rule.
awful
So,
to tackle in any
now.
particular campaign. If I have to declare war non-stop in order to keep my economy afloat, there's something really broken about that, isn't it? You could say, oh, you can maintain less armies. Sure. Yeah, sure. I could just go with Katrin and her pals over there. Go with just one army. That's a brilliant idea.
in the great Orthodoxy's name.
Sure, I could do that. It wouldn't necessarily be the wisest choice in my life, but yeah, I could totally do that, right? Just go with one army against the legions of hell. Sure, that's absolutely brilliant plan right there.
Against chaos.
what makes certain factions strong, ignore Isaac, he's not really gonna threaten me right there. Or maybe he will, I don't know. Maybe I'm going out of money again.
The Great Bear
Who knew?
demands your execution.
Even Castalton doesn't have enough money to pay for this.
The dra-
Rip me.
Yes?
What? Sigma's will. Come then.
You gotta feel bad for the Ostermark right there. They are so screwed. Not gonna get involved in that affair.
child of
Who calls?
Something I could do, however, is declare war on the burning wing nomads. Yes, what a glorious campaign experience. Just cancel that. That's what I'm gonna do. Not gonna lie, that feels pretty awful when you have to deal with it. It really does. It also feels pretty awful to have this gimmicky mechanic if you're playing Catherine and Castalton where you can't confederate the other, nor can you declare war on the other, and just have to endure the supporter system. Like, say what you will about Troy, because this is based on Troy, right? Say what you will about the way Troy was built as a game. In Troy, when you're playing Paris versus Hector, you didn't have these limitations. The supporter race, sure, it was heavily encouraged for you to do it, but it wasn't this rope. And the worst part is, like, the worst part about the system is just how redundant it is once you're done with it, or if you're playing as
Sister of Ice.
or if you're playing as.
Feel my power.
Ooh, that's a lot.
The frost.
I will permit.
Yeah, ooh, that kind of ended up badly. I mean, it's just one army right now, so it's no problem.
I am the storm. Weaver of the
Yeah,
frost.
let's just develop this properly.
Heretic! Traitor! Blasphemer! Betrayer!
He won't declare war on. He won't declare war on Azazel, but he will declare war on Trog.
So, who
wind shape.
So we work with that.
Chaos.
Because that's all we got. And once again, bankrupt. This is how you play Catherine's campaign, by the way. Like, the reason I ended up making this particular video is because I was trying to make a campaign guide for Catherine, and it's just like, you realize how, these dynamics have existed since the launch of Immortal Empires, and the economic dynamic, the invocation dynamic, the devotion dynamic. That's existed since the launch of the game. Like, I understand that there are possibly bigger quote-unquote problems for CA to deal with, but this is ridiculous. How long? Like, the fact this is not fine. And you know what the sad part is about all that I described about supporters, invocation, economic situation, not feeling fulfilling, is that it's very easy. Like, I'm not joking. It is very, very easy for them to fix it. Like, I'm not joking. There are mods. Like, someone made a mod, or two mods, that do so much
Storm summoner. Overcome your
to
exhaustion.
resolve these problems that it's not even funny. Ooh, we got a big problem over here, boys and girls. Azazel. Well, at this point it doesn't matter because we got.
Together.
Yeah, Azazel may attack, but he's gonna get curb stomp, I think, right there. Let me put that in a different way, perhaps. Defeating something like Fraught, Azazel, Trog, all that should not feel like, oh, great, what next? that's it. No, that should be like
Kislev's great
an
gods.
overwhelming challenge, because it is. Like, undeniably so. Like, it is it is one of the more quote-unquote difficult parts of the game. And it should feel incredibly rewarding and satisfying, but the economic issues do hold it back quite a lot. And that's really the shame. It's not like Kislev is it's an awful race that has no redeeming qualities. No, they have a bunch of redeeming qualities. That's the reason why, despite everything I've stated in this video, this may surprise some people who watch my channel.
For I am a boy.
Despite everything, Kislev is actually one of my favorite races to play. Yeah, I bet that's surprising, but it's like the armies, like, they're good. The heroes, the patriarchs, like, just the overall feel of the faction. Like, if there's anything I will say about CA, because the way, because Kislev is a lot of their own work, but if there is anything I want to say about Creative Assembly with respect to all of this, they got certainly the feel right for both Kislev and Cafe, and that's probably where they put a lot of effort. Like, Cafe, certainly they built from the ground up. Well, obviously Games Workshop was involved, but the fact that we still have an economy that's designed for Realms of Cast, for the initial version of Realms of Cast, and it's, I want to point this out. It isn't just Kislev that has these kind of problems, this kind of awful dynamic. It's also something that affects Nurgle, for instance, Sinch. Like, yeah, they finally changed. They finally had the casualty replenishment for Sinch. Great! Took you long enough. Still haven't fixed the underlying economic issues for Kairos.
Remember your training. The ice goes.
But yeah, I guess GG right there, CA.
They are one people. Kislev never falters.
And compared to how great of a job, like the sad part is how great of a job they did with
One land. Go with pride.
certain races, or how they redesigned certain races, because they did
A tool to keep
redesign
chaos
to a certain extent the economies or all that. Like, this is gonna sound very unpopular for a lot of people, because like a lot of the Warhammer 2 fanbase, but I really like what they did with the Dark Elves in Warhammer 3. Like, just overall great job. Like, maybe that's part of it as well. I don't know. Maybe that's one of the reasons, because a lot of people did not like what CA did with the Dark Elves.
Your Tsar lives. Kislev.
But I don't know. That's just personal opinion on that, if you will.
Else you dragon. I appreciate.
Select
So make of it what make of it what you will.
child of
Costin here, signing out, and stay tuned for more. Next up, campaign guide for Catron, or if you have any suggestions, please let me know. Also, check out the mods that do make this better. Like, I'm not joking, they are available, they're fairly simple mods, and they do make for a much better campaign experience if you're playing a Kislev campaign.